I drifted down the sidewalk toward the Royal Court shopping plaza to my merciless 9-to-5 shift as a cell phone and computer repairman. 8 long hours spent staring through Tech Zone's tinted windows at a strip mall like any other in Oakfield, Texas, fantasizing about a better life that would never come. Sleep clung to me like glue, hung in the corners of my eyes as I finished my Red Bull and rounded Lincoln Avenue onto Wilson Lane. The last stretch of my 6-block commute always took courage. One look at the Royal Court and its endless stretch of asphalt sadness made me want to keep walking until my feet disintegrated. The fact that I was still here in Oakfield, 26 years after my birth, was a testament to my vapid, meaningless life. Where most of the people I knew had left long ago and made something of themselves, I'd stayed, and stayed, and stayed. Overweight and frequently out of breath. A stunted man boy who leased an apartment that held a single couch, a sometimes functional toaster, and a few cracked dishes. That's me, RJ, short for Ronald Jones. Associate technician at Tech Zone for life. Yay. Besides football games attended by a feverish, bordering on fanatical fan base for the local high school football team, nothing much ever happened in Oakfield. Which was why I was surprised to see the pair of police cruisers parked in front of Pete's Hardware as it came into view. Pete himself stood near the curb, shaking his head as 2 cops dragged his employee, Lyle Brooks, from the store. Blood splotched his shirt and jeans. A string of spit swayed from Lyle's chin like egg yolk. He stared at me as I neared. No, he stared through me, with eyes that were empty and dazed, like someone had just stunned him with a cattle prod. By the time I made it past him and into Tech Zone, I'd grown damp with sweat, which turned to ice as soon as I opened the door. As usual, my manager, Avery Carter, paid me no mind. She just stood there looking effortlessly beautiful, like she'd fallen off the cover of Cosmo, while she watched Lyle's arrest through the window.
"I can't believe it," she said. "Wasn't he just in here yesterday? What happened?"
The question rolled out of my mouth before I could stop it. I already knew the answer. I just needed her to confirm it. She glanced at me and ran a hand through her sandy blonde hair, a motion that would normally have me swooning, but now only left me chilled.
"They're saying he killed his wife or something, that he strangled her to death."
The words plowed into me like a Mack truck. I nearly vomited as ribbons of heat flooded my brain. I saw her then, tied up like a slab of meat in Lyle's basement, staring up at me from the picture on his phone. Saw those fist-blackened eyes and lips glossed in blood. Sarah, who pleaded for help from someone, from anyone, before Lyle silenced her forever. The image flickered and flashed. Glowworms danced through my vision. When I toppled, I swear it felt like I was outside myself, watching Avery rush across the tiled floor with her arms outstretched, but nowhere close enough to break my fall. You wouldn't believe the things you see when you repair people's cell phones for a living. Besides all the dick pics, and there are way too many dick pics, there's a lot of weird shit people like to memorialize. Like, just the other day, this bodybuilder dropped off a phone full of pictures of him sitting in an oversized high chair, wearing nothing but a diaper and bonnet, while aggressively sucking on a pacifier. There was photo after photo of him smearing baby food all over his face and chest. And also a video of him shitting his diaper, doing the goo goo gaga thing, kid you not, while whoever was running the camera told him he was such a naughty, naughty boy. Look, I try not to rifle through people's personal lives, I really do. But sometimes my urges get the better of me. I'm a pervert, a voyeur, depraved, sick. Whatever you want to call me, I won't argue. I'll probably agree. It's not something I'm proud of. I don't want to be the guy in the trench coat masturbating in the bushes outside your house while your wife showers. Not that I've ever done that, but you get my point. I want to be a better person, to stop living vicariously through other people's lives and to actually start living one myself. And I had, for nearly a year, before Lyle waltzed through the door and dumped his phone on the counter. One look at it and I knew, just fucking knew, there would be pictures on the camera roll I'd want to see, that I had to see, and there were. There was Lyle's extremely attractive wife, Sarah, dancing around the living room in a set of acorn print pajamas. Another one with Sarah, outside, perched on a fence post, looking innocent beneath a blushing summer sun. A selfie of the happy couple on a hike. Another selfie in a park, sitting on a bench near a duck-speckled pond. Selfie after selfie. So many goddamn selfies. And so goddamn boring. This is why I'd broken my sobriety? For this? I'd refused to believe it. Which is why I hit the deleted folder. And it was there. Right fucking there. The photo I'd been searching for the entire time. And the picture I wish I hadn't found. Sarah, bound and gagged in an ill-lit basement, thrust against a cinder block wall with her face washed out and both eyes blackened. Sarah, with the hand clutching her neck in blue-veined violence, the fingertips leaving little dimpled imprints on her skin. A hand I recognized as Lyle's, the bastard, based on the barbed wire tattoo inked around his wrist. I'd debated telling Avery, and I'd almost shouted, "Hey, I think you should come take a look at this." That's how much the picture bothered me. It felt wrong, dangerous. But then I remembered that at TechZone, we take customer privacy very, very seriously, and I'd already been written up once. I went back to work, digging Lyle's pocket lint from the charging port with the paperclip. 5 hours later, I charged him $34.99 and watched him saunter back into the hazy afternoon heat without another word like the piece of shit I am. I woke up in the hospital. All around me, machines beeped and chattered. Across the hall, someone moaned. A nurse with a featureless face asked me how I was feeling and would I like some soup.
"No," I said. "What happened?" "I'm afraid you had a seizure, darling."
I grimaced and rubbed my temples. A seizure? They'd haunted my childhood, left me quaking, foam-mouthed, on elementary playgrounds more than once. It took a couple of months for the doctors to diagnose me with epilepsy, a condition I thought I'd long outgrown. I hadn't had a seizure in over 15 years, and I never thought I would again. But it seemed fate had other plans for me. Avery gave me the rest of the week off. I spent most of it locked away in the dark reaches of my apartment, playing video games and taking edibles. I filled my time with movies and brainless television shows. I browsed Avery's Instagram page and imagined myself in the place of her dipshit boyfriend, Eric Van Horn, and his mirrored aviators. There we were on vacation in Colorado, hiking through a field of columbines, both of us smiling at the camera with our bronzed faces and sparkling teeth. Another post. An elegant dinner. Just the two of us clinking our wine glasses over a table salted in votive candles, looking ready to tear each other's clothes off the second we left the restaurant. And, how precious, a picture of us in a bookstore, drinking coffee while laughing at some hilarious inside joke. I love our inside jokes. They're so funny, so sweet. Our 1-year anniversary, Avery's caption read, "Find someone who can make you laugh." I'd make you laugh, Avery, if you'd give me the chance. I couldn't imagine what it would be like to have an authentic conversation with her. To command her attention in that way was a fantasy of the highest order, and one wasted on Eric, who I'm sure talked about nothing but finance and weightlifting. The only reason Avery was with the guy was because he had money. If you ordered a ribeye anywhere near Houston, there was a good chance it came from Van Horn stock. Still, he didn't appreciate her like I did. Didn't notice the small things, like how adorably her nose scrunched when she concentrated on something, or how her dimple popped when she really smiled. He didn't care that she woke up early most mornings to take pictures of the sunrise or realize she dreamed of one day becoming a professional photographer. Normally, I'd spend hours thinking about it, how I deserved her and he didn't. But right now, I couldn't. Not with that damn photo of Sarah bobbing through my subconscious like some insidious fishing lure, ripping me back to reality every few seconds. And on TV, the few times I'd flipped on the news, there she was, Sarah Brooks with the oval face and glossy lips, shooting sunshine at me through the screen with her smile. Sarah, who had been found tied to a sewage line in the basement of her quaint suburban home with her wrists bound in constrictor knots. If only they'd known about Lyle, the real Lyle, her parents said. Maybe they could have prevented this. If only someone had told them. The way they wept and dabbed their eyes, the way they sniffed and sobbed, they might as well have been sitting in my living room, talking to me. By Friday, I couldn't take wallowing in my shame anymore. I showered and went to work. Avery stood when I entered, looking alarmed, which was nothing new. I often got the feeling I made her uncomfortable, because I did. It was her phone she'd busted me snooping through a few months back, lurking behind me on silent feet as I perused a few of her beach pictures and zoomed in on her hips.
What are you doing, RJ?
The only reason she didn't fire me on the spot was pity. And not even that so much as a sense of obligation to my mom, who'd been her favorite teacher in high school, and a shoulder to cry on after she lost her father. Mom, who'd begged Avery to take me on before moving to Boston to be closer to my normal, non-lecherous sister, Janelle, and her non-lecherous kids. She made Avery promise she'd look out for me, her final act of motherhood before washing her hands of any further parental obligation. Not that I blamed her. But a favor only buys you so much rope, and I'd already used up most of mine. So, yes, Avery's alarm didn't surprise me. Her concern did.
Why are you here?
She asked.
You're supposed to be rested.
I rubbed the back of my neck. The thermostat in my cheeks clicked a few degrees higher.
I can't. Not after what happened. You had a seizure. Anyone would have a hard time with that.
She touched my arm, and her fingers set off little earthquakes in my heart. I wanted to cover her hand with my own and hold it there forever.
Thanks, but I'm talking about Sarah.
She blinked.
Lyle's wife,
I added.
Oh, that.
Her eyes clouded, and she glanced beyond me, through the front window, like she was watching Lyle's arrest all over again, managing to look both fragile and lost. I wanted to curl my arm around her and pull her close, to tell her how sorry I was that Sarah's death had affected her this way. I wanted to offer even a sliver of comfort, an acknowledgement of her pain, which I knew ran deeper than this week's events, much deeper. Instead, I opened my mouth and blurted,
It makes you think about your dad, doesn't it?
The clouds parted, and her face paled as she snapped toward me, almost as if slapped. I instantly cursed myself. With a single, moronic sentence, I'd sent her spiraling back to the creek near Junction Bluffs where they'd found her father, face down on the bank 2 decades earlier. His murder was big news for a while and had shocked the town in the same way Sarah's had, with one exception. The cops had never found his killer. She wiped her eyes and nodded, and was about to say something when the door chimed. The smell of artificial wood and vanilla hit me first, the glare from the sunglasses second. A pair of aviators tilting up to reveal 2 ice blue eyes above a smile like freshly fallen snow. Eric, in all his polo-shirted glory, here to steal my moment.
Hey, Tubbs,
He said, brushing past me to scoop Avery into his arms. Tubbs. Because he'd never once asked my name the 1,001 times he'd barged into the store to steal Avery. Tubbs. Because it emasculated me, and we both knew there wasn't a damn thing I would or could do about it.
What are you doing here?
Avery asked with a giggle, pulling back to tap his chest.
I thought you had to work today. I do, but I figured I'd see if you wanted to grab a quick coffee first. Sure,
She said, glancing my way.
Start with Tuesday's drop-offs, RJ. I'll be back in a bit.
She wouldn't. She'd take her time. They'd be doing more than simply having coffee. I watched them go, fuming inside, at myself more than at them, as I turned my attention to the repairs. A cell phone either worked or it didn't. Hard drives were black and white, on and off. Unlike people, they actually needed me to function. I shook my head and groaned. How stupid to bring up her dad like that. It was the first time in over a year that Avery had looked at me with something other than barely restrained disgust, and I'd ruined it in the space of a few seconds. Figures. I sat down, went to work, repaired a few cracked screens, swapped out a laptop circuit board, and updated an ancient Mac OS. An hour passed, then 2 passed. Still no Avery. There were batteries to replace and malware to scrub, keyboards to clean and software to configure. By the time I snagged the blue iPhone from the repair stack, scrolling through the camera roll was the furthest thing from my mind. I only opened the photo app by accident, with a stray swipe of my thumb as I aimed for the settings. My eyes settled on a picture a third of the way down the screen. Nothing remarkable about it, nothing that demanded I click on it. But click on it I did. A locker room, a team in celebration, players frozen in high fives, a kid with spiked hair giving what looked like a victory speech, his chest aimed proudly outward. The entire scene was one of frenzied, joyful emotion, which was why my gaze came to rest on the boy seated on the bench near the lockers. He wore no shirt and had ribs that cut against his skin like a poorly wrapped gift. His shoulders were slumped, his arms hanging from his knees in what felt like a contradiction of the moment, like he'd suffered some monumental personal defeat instead of victory. I immediately felt a weird kinship with the kid and zoomed in on his face, on what little I could see of his eyes, which were mostly hidden behind his weeping brown bangs. I wanted to peel them back and gain a better understanding as to his state of mind. Who had done this to him, and why? I wanted to tell him to hang in there, that things would get better, and that high school doesn't last forever. But I never got the chance, because the picture moved. The only reason I didn't drop the phone was because my hands were already resting on the countertop when the boy lifted his head, actually fucking lifted it, and looked right at me with eyes that were vacant pools of sorrow.
He'll never stop. Please, you have to make him stop.
His voice whooshed through my head like a cold gust of wind. I'm not certain, but I think my heart stopped.
Looks like you made some decent progress.
I startled at Avery's voice and tried to stand, then tipped backward off my stool and slammed ass first onto the floor.
Jesus, RJ, are you okay?
She asked, kneeling to cup my shoulder. Her perfume filled my nostrils with a vaguely floral scent. I thought, for a second, she might bend down and give me a kiss.
I'm fine.
I lied with a wince.
I'll be okay.
I popped my jaw and glanced behind her, toward the phone.
No, you won't,
she replied.
You shouldn't be here. You've had a rough week. Go home. Take Monday off, too. I'll see you Tuesday.
I left from Tech Zone into an afternoon so ripe with humidity, it felt like walking into a sponge. I'm not much of a sun worshiper. I'm a ginger. Heat like this would normally send me scurrying for the HVAC bliss of my apartment. But not today. Today I needed to walk, to think. When I reached Lincoln Avenue, I turned east instead of west and headed toward downtown and its ever-deteriorating row of shops that somehow still stood in defiance to the capitalist tyranny of the Amazons and Walmarts of the world. Jerry's Sporting Goods, Office Express, The Weathered Spine, a bookstore that served exceptionally bad cappuccinos paired with stale pastries and scones. The sun sparkled off the cement as I walked and forced me into a squint. The tarred blacktop wobbled beneath my shoes like cake batter. My shins were covered with sweat, and it felt like work to breathe, like my lungs would soon swell and overheat. The temperature had to be north of 100 degrees, not that I gave it much thought. All I could think about, all I could picture, was that photo, that kid. He won't stop. He'll never stop. The words rolled around the inside of my head like a tumbler full of gravel. They grated against my skull. What did they mean? Who was this kid? And who was he talking about? Who was it that wouldn't stop? Doing what? I didn't have a clue. All I knew was I couldn't go home. Not after what had happened. Had it happened? Another question without an answer. A question that only raised more questions. Had my brain short-circuited? Had the seizure turned it into a mash of smoldering neurons and tissue, and now it was simply misfiring, painting incoherent visions only I could see on the screens of Tech Zone customers? As badly as I wanted to believe that, I couldn't. The way the kid had looked at me, the way he'd stared straight into my soul, like he'd been in there this entire time, buried in all those photos, waiting for me, and only me. To pick up the phone felt too personal, too real. Crazy, I know. Narcissistic even. But what else was I supposed to think? That I'd lost my mind? Because that was the only other reasonable alternative. Maybe I had. Either way, the event had given me something I'd lacked for a long, long time. Purpose. A plan had hatched somewhere in my subconscious, sparked by the banners hanging all around me, clinging limply to lamp posts stretched taut over entrances. The displays were typical this time of year, with streamers and cutouts everywhere I looked. Main Street windows shouted at me in burgundy and white decorative paint, with far too many exclamation points.
Go Bulldogs! Oakfield State Champions! Crush Jefferson!
At the center of the town stood the stadium, soon to be pulsing with streams of light and noise. I dreaded going inside. The prospect made my skin itch. Crowds bothered me. They made me feel untethered and unmoored. What should I do with my hands, my arms? Where should I sit? Like I might float away at any moment. And the smell of so many people mixed together, that stale soup of cologne and perfume and sweat, always turned my stomach. But none of that mattered because I'd be there tonight, scouring the field for the kid from the picture with the brown hair and sad eyes. I had to find a way to talk to him, to discover what he meant. I had to help him. After Sarah Brooks, doing nothing wasn't an option. I killed the rest of the afternoon and the early evening at the Shell station across from the stadium, lounging in a booth near the magazine rack, drinking 32-ounce cherry Cokes and reading issues of Wired and Popular Mechanics. Anything to keep my mind off the talking photo. By the time I made my way to the game with a hot dog in hand, I'd developed a solid case of indigestion. Thomas Green Memorial Stadium rose like a tumor in front of me, malignant with school spirit, bleeding burgundy and white. I trembled as I purchased my ticket and limped through its gate. At 26, I felt no better than I had at 16, no more confident or self-assured. In fact, I felt worse. Where before I had managed to somewhat blend into the student section, I now stuck out like a sore thumb, an obese adult in a yellow and purple Tech Zone polo and an ill-fitting pair of slacks. With my glasses and curly red hair, I wondered if I looked a bit like a pedophile or a mass-shooting perp with a gun hidden in my belt. The game started as I squeezed my way into a bleacher midway down the stands with another Coke. I searched the field for the skinny kid with the slumped posture. Where was he? Why couldn't I find him anywhere? It wasn't until halftime that I had my answer. My stomach clenched as the announcer asked for the crowd to rise for a moment of silence. There he was, the boy from the picture, staring back at me from the Jumbotron. Jeremy Coleman, dead at 17.
What happened?
I asked of the man next to me.
To the kid? A heart attack, I think. Died right there on the 40-yard line last season.
He gave me a somber shake of his head.
Wasn't much of a player, too small. But damn did he give it his all. That's his family down there. First game they've been to since it happened.
The man gestured toward a diminutive woman with black hair several rows lower. sobbing next to a guy in a cowboy hat who had his arm curled around her. He whispered something into her ear and clutched her closer. She shook her head and pushed away, then stood and fast walked up the stairs past me with a muffled sob that sounded like the cry of a wounded animal. I pushed to my feet and hustled after her, wheezing with the effort, barely managing to catch her as she strode into the parking lot.
"Excuse me, ma'am,"
I said in a voice loud enough to startle her. She turned and looked at me with a face that was older than Jeremy's, but too young to be that of his mother. His sister, maybe? A friend?
"Yes,
What? What did I want from her?
sorry to bother you, but the player who passed away, you knew him, right? Jeremy?"
I saw her attempting to process my face as she wiped the tears from her eyes.
"Were you one of his teachers?" "No. Jeremy and I knew each other online."
Her squint deepened at my lie, and she crossed her arms.
"Aren't you a little old for him? You a creep or something?"
A bad start. I held up my hands.
"It's not like that. We talked about computers and tech, video games mostly, stuff like that. And then he just vanished. I didn't even know he died until recently. You're his sister, right?"
Her features bunched, and for a minute, I thought I'd pressed too far too fast, but then she nodded.
"And you are?" "Sorry, RJ, nice to meet you."
I offered my hand. She didn't take it.
"My brother didn't belong on the football field." "How so?" "The other players treated him like the water boy, bullied him, that kind of thing." "What about the coach?" "What about him? Didn't he stop it?"
She laughed.
"Are you kidding me? He was the worst one. He preyed on Jeremy's insecurities, bullied him along with the rest, and then had the balls to profit off him." "Profit? How?" "Pills. He pushed Jeremy beyond his limits. The kid never complained once, not even when he injured his knee. He could barely walk, but that didn't stop the coach. He shot Jeremy up and put him out on the field, fed him painkillers, and then, after a few months, he sold him painkillers." "Wait, what?" "Yeah, and not just him. Any player who got hurt." "How do you know this?" "I found the bottles in Jeremy's room and, look, I don't know why I'm telling you anything. If you really want to know what happened to my brother, go ask Coach Brennan yourself. Not that I'd recommend it." "Brennan?"
The name flashed and settled in the pit of my stomach like a lead brick.
"Mason Brennan? Why? You know him?" "Yes. Well, no, not personally. Jeremy talked about him. Said he was an asshole." "Yeah, at least he got that part right."
She started toward the parking lot. I followed after her.
"Wait, you said you wouldn't recommend talking to Coach Brennan. Why?" "Because,"
she said, glancing back over her shoulder.
"this town loves its football, and anyone who gets in the way of that eventually gets hurt."
Mason Brennan. The name hung over me like a storm cloud. I'd spent high school trying to avoid the guy. 4 miserable years ducking into bathrooms and slinking around hall corners, hoping he wouldn't spot me and send me crashing into a locker or sprawling to the floor. His taunts,
"Hey, McDonald,"
were the reason I changed my name to RJ. The guy was a ruthless bully, a true dickhead if there ever was one. Popular, of course, and the first 4-star football recruit from Oakfield in over a decade, which covered a hell of a lot of sins. Last I'd heard, he'd gone to Baylor on a full-ride scholarship, and I hadn't thought about him since, until now. The fact that he'd returned without my knowledge didn't surprise me. My world consisted of the 6 square blocks between my apartment and Tech Zone. After high school, I'd purposefully wrapped myself in a cone of blissful ignorance. I had done everything I could to bubble wrap myself from the outside world. I didn't care about current events, the stock market, wars, or politics, or what happened in town. To me, none of it mattered. I simply wanted to be left alone, to live life on my terms, in peace. And now, with the utterance of a single name, that peace had shattered. Mason Brennan, hometown football hero. Mason Brennan, head coach of the Oakfield Bulldogs. Mason Brennan, ostensible kiddie drug dealer. It wasn't a stretch. He'd been on the fringes of the party scene back in the day, wheeling between the burnouts, slackers, and jocks, slippery as a fish. He did his fair share of drugs, everyone knew that, especially coke. But he always came out clean when the cops busted a party or pulled him over. His lawyer father even managed to help him slip a DUI charge after a car crash left his then-girlfriend, Maggie Thompson, permanently disabled. I spotted her around town on occasion, laboring down the sidewalk in her wheelchair. Just another piece of collateral damage floating in Mason's wake. And now it was happening all over again. Mason back to harvest a fresh batch of victims, while everyone else in town looked the other way. Everyone except me. I wasn't going to let him. This time, I'd actually make a stand. I waited for him in the parking lot, loitering near the player entrance until the game petered out and the crowd thinned. When he sauntered outside, I recognized him instantly. He had the same build, still muscular, but now with a sizable Bud Light paunch and a thinning hairline. His gait was the same too, his legs slightly wishboned, taking long, stiff strides as he aimed for a gleaming black Ford F-150 parked a few spots down near the curb. A nervous buzz filled my ears as I started after him. Nausea bubbled thick at the base of my esophagus, my reflux cranking to 10. I had to say something, do something. My knees croaked, my spine popped. Words formed. I cleared my throat and...
Hey, Mace, you're gonna meet us over at the Crow, right? Celebrate the win?
The voice came from my left, barking over a freshly revved engine. Another truck firing beyond the F-150. Two guys leered from inside the cab, grinning. I knew them, a couple of Mason's jock friends from his high school glory days, their faces already flushed pink with booze. One of them glanced my way and spat something dark into a beer can, his eyes seeming to go black for a second. A chill swam through my body, and I looked away before he could recognize me. I angled past Mason and kept right on walking. The Crow's Nest is about a mile from the stadium, 2 doors down from the only strip club in town, Pat's Truck Stop, a shady, all-nude venue that doesn't allow alcohol, or so I've heard. Most guys pick up a buzz at the Crow and then saunter over to Pat's to empty whatever money is left in their wallet on girls half their age, who were more than willing to help them. I'd never set foot inside. As stupid a notion as it was, I still had aspirations of seeing a naked woman without paying for her to take off her clothes. I hope it will be Avery. It's an idiotic fantasy. I know, since I'd never even so much as kissed a girl. Unbuttoning a shirt was simply unimaginable. It took half an hour to walk to the Crow. My feet were aching by the time I reached the place, and I settled down on a bench near the parking lot where I could see Mason's truck. The Crow was ripe with the meatheads, the bikers, and the jocks, all of whom were itching to relive their glory days. Going inside was a dangerous proposition. A geek like me would be an easy mark, and I didn't particularly feel like losing any teeth tonight. Instead, I sat there and played out the scenarios in my head. Me intercepting Mason with a pithy shout, "Hey, fuckface!" before cracking his orbital bone with a haymaker. Me sliding up behind him to unload a vicious kick to the nuts. Both options that would likely end up with me bleeding in the dirt. No, I'd need to try a different tact. Nothing too aggressive. Just enough to let him know I knew. A few words to give him pause. What they'd be, I still couldn't fathom. An hour passed, then 2 passed. The dark, silent confines of my apartment called to me like a siren. I wanted to leave, to stand up, walk away, and forget any of this had ever happened. But I couldn't. Not when I'd done that very thing with Lyle's phone and didn't report what I saw. And for what? So I could keep my shitbox job and indulge my schoolboy crush on Avery? Avery, who treated me like an annoying younger brother, and one she didn't particularly like. Pathetic as I was, I knew if I did the same thing now, ran, and another kid like Jeremy died, I'd never be able to forgive myself, to live with myself. something I already struggled with mightily. So, I just sat there with waves of muffled bass spilling from the truck stop, feeling like a fraud, until a shadow lurched from the bar. It had the right shape, the same dense outline of muscle bordering on fat I'd seen at the stadium, accompanied by twirling car keys. I stood and made my way to his truck, praying I'd have the nerve to speak this time. Jeremy's pleading voice leaked through my head. "He'll never stop. Please, you have to make him stop." I didn't think I could make Mason stop doing anything, but I'd at least try.
Mason?
My pitch climbed on the N and stamped it with a question mark, like I didn't know it was him.
Who's there?
He answered in a squint, looking back, the edges of his words slurring together in a way that let me know he was operating with a comfortable buzz. His eyes widened with recognition as I neared.
McDonald? Is that you? Please don't call me that.
A wobbly grin swam across his cheeks.
Holy shit, it is you. How you been, man? You work at Tech Zone, right? Only reason I recognized you is because I dropped my phone off for repair the other day.
And there it was, the owner of the phone, Mason Brennan. Everything suddenly made sense.
I saw your picture on the wall,
he continued.
Employee of the month. I asked for you, but your boss said you were out sick.
He winked.
She's cute, by the way. Said something about you having a seizure. You okay, man?
I managed a nod, and he reached out and cupped my shoulder with surprising tenderness, like he half expected me to fall down on the spot.
I'm glad. I deal with a lot of concussions. Brain injuries are brain injuries. It's good to see you're feeling better.
The empathy and warmth in his voice set me back a step. Whatever I'd expected from him, it wasn't this.
So, what brings you here, Ron? You stalking me or something? Want an autograph?
He laughed. I frowned.
This is going to sound strange, but...
My jaw opened and shut and opened again.
The kid on your team who died. Jeremy Coleman. Yeah, what about him? It sounds like he struggled, with the team and all.
Mason shrugged.
No more than anyone else. Why? What's it to you? Nothing. It's just... I've heard some rumors about some pretty bad things going on with the team and... And what, Ron? Spit it out. And some things, well, about you.
His features hardened, and I glimpsed a bit of the old Mason surfacing, a shark swimming up from the depths.
Look, I don't know what it is you are doing here, Ron, but I'll tell you the same thing I've told everyone else. Football's a rough sport. Jeremy was a good kid. What happened to him was unfortunate. A freak accident, that's all. Now I gotta go. The wife's waiting up for me, if you know what I mean.
He winked again, elbowed me.
Good catching up. Maybe I'll see you around town sometime.
He moved for the truck, and I grabbed his arm, clamping down harder than I'd intended.
Wait, Mason, please.
He looked down at my hand and back at me again, his forehead creasing in warning. I asked the question anyway.
Are you selling pain pills to these kids? Is that what happened to Jeremy?
He rubbed the bridge of his nose and blew out a long, slow sigh.
Damn it! Why'd you have to ask that?
And then his fist rammed into my gut with a blinding violence that emptied the air from my lungs. I doubled over in time to see his knee coming up a half second before it collided with my jaw and sent me stumbling backward into his truck, where I collapsed. A fireball of pain filled my mouth, and I fought for breath as Mason crouched next to me, looking like a dad settling in for one of life's little lectures.
Look, Ron, I know I didn't treat you well in high school. I'm sorry for that, truly. I'm not proud of the things I did as a young man, or of this.
I vaguely registered him waving a hand at me like the motion absolved him of any wrongdoing.
But let me tell you something. If I hear that you're spreading these rumors about me, what I did back then, and what I just did now, will pale in comparison to what I'll do to you next.
His fingers worked into my hair, and he guided my eyes toward his with a quick, forceful tug. His face swam in the dim, sodium vapor light like an impressionistic art piece. His mouth and cheeks and nose were one swirling smudge of color.
You understand me, McDonald?
I blinked and managed to nod as my fingers scraped dirt and wound around something hard.
Good. I'm glad we had this little.
His eyes widened as I slammed the rock into his temple. It connected with the moist crunch, and he thumped down onto his ass, swinging for me as he did in a wide, lazy loop that missed by a mile. I lunged and brought the rock down on his skull again, and again, pounding away until there was nothing left of his face but a warm mash of blood and doughy flesh. My eyes slivered open to a headache. Every inch of my body throbbed. From Mason's beating and from the violence with which I'd returned the favor. My jaw, my shoulder, my stomach, everything was bruised and groaning. After rolling Mason's body under the truck, I ran the entire way home, taking back roads and alleys, making sure to steer clear of any street lights that might illuminate the bright firework of blood spattered across my shirt and torso. Had anyone seen me? Had anyone seen Mason? Had anyone seen his corpse? I didn't think so, but they would soon enough. I rolled out of bed, stumbled into the bathroom, and retched. What have you done, RJ? Killed Mason, that's what. The thought ignited a round of dry heaves. I puked until it felt like my stomach would tear, and then limped into the shower and pulverized my skin with hot water. My mind ran in a loop, Mason's knee rising toward my chin, falling to the asphalt with the taste of copper on my tongue. Mason crouching down to give me his little sermon about spreading rumors. The rage whooshing to life in my chest as my hand curled around the rock and brought it, hard, into his temple. The horrible crunch of his skull as I connected. The sensation of pottery breaking as I turned his face to pulp. Jesus. I forced the image from my mind, dried off, and flung myself onto my mattress and lay there the entire day. I didn't move once. A cold wall of air conditioning socked me in the face as I pushed into tech zone, the bell dinging cheerily at my entrance. Avery was at the counter, where a customer stood with his back to me. Not a customer, I realized with a chill, but a cop, wearing a set of dress blues.
Morning, RJ. How are you feeling?
Avery asked, peering around him. I wanted to say, like shit.
Fine. Thanks for the time off.
My gaze remained on the officer. I was ready to bolt.
Hey, RJ,
the man said, turning with a smile I recognized, one corner of his mouth tugging slightly higher than the other. Light gray eyes, a time-wrinkled forehead and a mustache that belonged to the 80s. Slow to anger, quick to laugh. Frank Cullen, my mother's one-time fiancé and now long-ago ex. I hadn't spoken with him in over a year, but of all the losers she'd dragged home during my formative years, Frank was by far the best, and too good for her by a mile.
Hey, Frank,
I said with a smile of my own, my nerves jangling a little less. If he was here to arrest me for Mason's murder, he would have done so by now, and with a healthy contingent of cops in tow to back him up.
What brings you in?
Don't say Mason, don't say Mason, don't say Mason.
Mason Brennan.
My knees hinged. Light danced through my eyes. I felt like I'd been punched.
You knew him, right? Knew him?
I echoed, lamely.
Yeah, an old classmate of yours, if I remember correctly. He's dead.
I mimed surprise, which wasn't hard with the amount of adrenaline spurting through my veins.
You're kidding. What happened? Someone beat him to death at the crow's nest. Holy shit,
I mumbled. I didn't know what else to say.
That's not even the craziest part. Turns out the guy's been dealing painkillers to his players. Can you believe that? Percocet,
Dilaudid, Valium, all kinds of opiates. A bunch of students came forward over the weekend. His eyes narrowed. How do you not know this? It's been all over the news. I tapped my temple. I had a seizure last week. The doctor told me to avoid screens for a few days. Oh, right. Avery mentioned that. I'm sorry to hear they're back. It's okay. They, know who did it? Killed Mason? Nope, not yet, he said as he snatched a phone from the counter and placed it in a clear plastic bag. But I'm hoping this might help. This town has sure taken a turn for the worse, hasn't it? Avery said. I'll say. Still, if you ask me, whoever did this did those kids a favor. Sounds like the guy had it coming. Damn shame what happened to that Miller kid. The way Frank said it, the way he looked at Avery, with so much heat for a moment. I wanted to tell him it was me, that Jeremy himself had clued me in. But then the look faded, and Frank marched toward the door, stopping next to me long enough to squeeze my shoulder. Good to see you, RJ. Say hello to your mother for me the next time you talk to her, will you? Sure thing, Frank. Let's do lunch sometime. He nodded, and I watched him go, then turned back to Avery, who was gazing at me with something close to genuine concern, an expression that set my blood fizzing. To have her clear green eyes so squarely focused on me stole my breath. Are you sure you're okay, RJ? You look pale. If you need a few more days off, it's no problem. I'm fine, I said, forcing a smile. Just fine. I focused on work, wiping operating systems and reformatting hard drives like my life depended on it, which, in a way, it did. The job was the only thing that kept my mind off the memory of Mason's face buckling beneath the rock like wet cement. I still couldn't believe I'd killed him. Christ. It was only a matter of time before Frank returned with the SWAT team to arrest me. I half expected them to burst in at any minute. Only they didn't. Eric did. Over and over. Every single day. Sometimes with flowers. Sometimes with boxes of cheap grocery store candy. Always with his dopey meathead smile and an invitation for Avery to join him on some quick excursion for lunch or coffee, or to duck out early for a drink. You don't mind, do you, RJ? No, of course not. By all means, go ahead. I'll handle things here. I hated every minute of it. I couldn't understand what she saw in him. I mean, sure, he had money, but he also loved football and beer, and had an unhealthy obsession with protein shakes. Avery enjoyed photography and Steinbeck. Didn't she know I'd read East of Eden not once, but twice? That I'd practically memorized The Grapes of Wrath? Didn't she care that I liked photography too? Because I did. Taking pictures helped me make sense of the world, to slow it down and process it one frame at a time. The only difference between her photos and mine was that I preferred to analyze people over nature. And of all the people in the world, I preferred to analyze her. The days bled into a week, the weeks into a month, and I marveled at my luck. I grabbed that lunch with Frank and tossed him a few questions about the case. His answers set me at ease. The cops seemed far more focused on Mason's drug dealing than his death. And not only the cops, the entire town did. Pictures of Jeremy were splashed on the local news and over the papers and the web. A primetime morning show picked up the piece and interviewed his sister, whose name it turned out was Kelly. She sat stone-faced as she spoke about Jeremy's descent into addiction and how he'd deteriorated after joining the team. She agreed that what had happened to Mason was wrong, but hey, bad decisions carried consequences, and Mason had certainly earned his. I didn't disagree. Time passed. Summer slipped into fall, and no more pictures spoke to me, not that I expected them to. I chalked up what had happened with Jeremy to the storm of electrical activity in my brain after the seizure. Sure, Mason had been an asshole, and an arguably evil person. But that didn't change the fact I'd taken the life of a husband and, as I later found out, a soon-to-be father. His wife had been 3 months pregnant the night I'd bludgeoned him to death. Apparently, she'd just picked out the crib. That, more than anything, fucked me up. I knew what it felt like to grow up without a father, and I swore I'd never hurt anyone again. Then the computer arrived.
Hello?
A voice called.
Is anyone here?
I poked my head out of the back office to find a slender, middle-aged woman shuffling into Tech Zone with a laptop in her hand.
Yes. Hi. How can I help you?
I said, swinging into full view. She set the laptop on the counter. It looked ancient and boxy, a relic that should have long ago been tossed in the recycle heap.
This was my father's. He died recently and I don't have his password. I meant to ask for it, but it all happened so fast.
She trailed off, her voice cracking on the last few words.
I'm sorry to hear that,
I offered.
Can you help me log in? I need to access his estate information.
I glanced at her PC. It was an HP, which meant a Windows operating system, and one that was likely out of date. A good sign I could gain access.
Shouldn't be a problem. When do you need it back?
Sometime this week would be great.
Sounds good,
I said, pulling it closer.
Check in with me in a week. If I get it done sooner, I'll let you know.
She scribbled down her information, left, and I went to work, hacking the thing in 15 minutes using a newly created administrator account. I would have done it faster if it weren't for the processor speed, or, more precisely, the lack thereof. The thing hummed with heat, whirring away like it was going to explode before the display loaded. The wallpaper resolved into a grainy photo of a man I pegged to be in his late 70s or early 80s. He wore glasses and a smile, holding what I guessed to be his grandson, a plump-cheeked toddler with blonde hair framing a pair of cobalt eyes, though it was hard to tell through all the files and folders cluttering the desktop. I set my hand upon the lid, about to close it, when the screen rippled. Shut it, I told myself, now. But I didn't, and the man's eyes ticked to the side, toward the corners, and came back to rest on me. Static filled my head. Time slowed. When I didn't move and didn't speak or breathe, it happened again. His eyes flicking right, toward a file, which I opened. Photos. Jesus. My stomach boiled. My blood turned to glue. Not again. I sat there, battling with myself. Don't do it, RJ. My arm paralyzed, my finger frozen a millimeter above the mouse pad. My heart hammered. Dread hung in my chest like a weight. Every cell of my being begged for me to close the laptop, to go outside and soak up the warm Texas sun and leave the pictures right where they were, forever unopened. But I didn't. I clicked instead. The first photo was of a dog and a red kerchief tied around its neck, wagging a pink tongue at the camera. Cute. The second, a group of children playing in a backyard sandbox. I could imagine them laughing as they made mud pies. It wasn't until the third picture that my pulse really started to hum. It was a gathering of sorts, in a quaint living room bedecked with floral curtains and striped wallpaper. And at its center, on an olive green sofa, sat the man from the desktop. He stared at the camera with eyes that were clouded with cataracts, and a mouth that hung slack. His cheeks were wrinkled like parchment. Next to him, with her hands folded neatly in her lap, sat a woman who appeared nearly as old as the man, maybe a few years younger at most. I would have guessed her to be his wife if it weren't for the look on her face as she looked at him. This flat, callous expression told me she'd rather be anywhere else than next to him. Why I stared at her for so long, I don't know. I was about to click the next photo, ready to move on, when the man's eyes sharpened and focused on me. His mouth opened, but only the left half moved. The right half was frozen in a waxy droop.
She makes me what?
The sentence wobbled through my head in a stroke-addled stutter, the last word turning to slush as I attempted to untangle it. Hut, herd, hood.
Hurt.
I muttered. The man nodded, tilted his head back to the cushion, and resumed his drooling station. I sat there, motionless, a single thought slowly uncoiling through my brain like a wisp of smoke. Fuck. One benefit of living in a small town is that it's easy to track someone down when you put your mind to it. My customer, Grace Simmons, had left me everything I needed to do so. A quick scan through the PC settings, and I discovered the name of her father, Levi Simmons. A Google search then yielded an address, 11834 Kirby Lane. When my lunch hour rolled around, I grabbed my keys, stood to lock the door, then hesitated. The guy was dead. Why go to his house? I sat back down, typed in another search query, Levi Simmons' death, Oakfield, and an obituary appeared. There was a memorial date, 2 days from today, at St. Luke's Episcopal, along with a picture of the man who'd spoken to me moments earlier. And even though I told myself there was no way in hell I'd go to his funeral, why? What good would it do? I knew I'd be there. The church stood perched atop a set of concrete steps, basking in a spray of gory evening light. A somber-faced man greeted me near its mouth and placed a memorial card into my hands before sweeping his arm to the side in a grand invitation to enter, which I did, unsteadily and with great effort. I hadn't been inside of a church in the better part of a decade. The formal atmosphere and ritualized movement always left me with a vague sense of disorientation upon leaving. I chose a pew near the back, far enough from Grace and her family that I wouldn't be noticed, and I turned my attention to the pamphlet. There, Levi stared back at me, a different man. Gone were the muddy eyes, slack expression, and the rubbery, drooping neck. In their place was a gentleman clad in a sport coat and tie, with a hint of a smile tugging at his lips. He looked poised, both dignified and alert, a man in full. A celebration of life, the card read in looping Gothic font beneath the picture. Dead at 76 years old.
A shame, isn't it?
I blinked and turned toward the voice. A woman sat there, staring at the card in my lap. I hadn't registered her entrance, but I knew her eyes. They were an opaque brown, set deep within a fleshy face that swallowed the stained glass light as she raised them toward mine. My pulse slowed. My blood clotted in my chest.
Sorry?
I said to the woman from the photo. She inclined her head toward the card again.
That Levi passed. A shame. He was such a good man.
She folded her hands. From the front of the room, an organ pumped out the first few notes of a song.
You knew him?
I asked. A stupid question, I realized, as it tumbled from my mouth.
Oh, yes. I was his caretaker. He had ALS. It's a terrible, terrible disease.
I nodded like I knew what she was talking about. I nodded like Levi and I were good pals, and we spent Saturday afternoons together, running around town to pick up his pills.
And how do you know Levi?
The woman asked, impaling me with the terrible weight of her gaze, which for some odd reason seemed familiar. And not just from the photo. It's like I'd seen it, her before, somewhere else. A brief snatch of deja vu I couldn't place.
No, he was a customer of mine, a friend.
The corners of her mouth tugged lower, her brow angled inward.
A customer? Where do you work?
My mouth opened, but before my tongue could form the words, the pastor cleared his throat and asked us to rise. I did so with a shrug, then snapped my attention forward as fast as possible. I didn't want to look at her for another second. The service lasted 40 minutes, the pastor summarizing the high points of Levi's life. A father of 2 and a Navy veteran. A husband of 40 years. A selfless man who helped those in need and relished the small but sweet things in life. A morning sunrise or an evening spent with family. The first smooth cast of the line on a weekend fishing trip. Sobs of grief punctuated the pastor's words. Kleenex was in no short supply. I might have needed one myself if it weren't for the woman sitting next to me. My skin itched with her malignant heat the entire time. When the service ended, I forced myself to reach out and touch her wrist.
I'm sorry, but I didn't get your name. Etta,
She said, before turning toward the aisle.
Etta Dunphy. Pleased to make your acquaintance.
Etta Dunphy, twice married, once divorced, once widowed. Another internet search, a LinkedIn profile. She worked as a nurse at Madison House, a palliative care agency offering at-home services for the terminally ill. The Google reviews were glowing.
I can't say enough about Etta. Her care and compassion with my husband Joseph in his time of need was a true gift. Etta helped my daughter's transition. She was so considerate and respectful. When my mother passed away, I was devastated, but Nurse Etta ensured her last days were ones filled with love and comfort.
I tilted back in my chair. Considerate, respectful, love and comfort. Maybe I'd misjudged the woman. I mean, what did I really have to go on? Another talking picture and a hunch? And whatever she'd done, I sure as hell wasn't going to do to her what I'd done to Mason. Killing him had been stupid. A rage-fueled impulse ignited by years of high school abuse. A crime I'd somehow been lucky enough to get away with. For now. This woman who, by all accounts, seemed like a gift to society, didn't deserve a rock to the skull. Rather, it sounded like she deserved a trophy and a medal from the mayor instead.
Morning, Tubbs.
Eric's voice pulled me from my task. I hadn't noticed his entrance. He stood in front of me in a robin egg blue polo, his hair freshly tousled with product, a few pink slivers of scalp showing through. Was it thinner? It looked thinner. And his skin didn't seem to shine with its normal health insurance glow. A shade or two paler at least.
Is Avery here? She had to run to the bank. Did she say when she'd be back? No.
Go away. Leave. He ran a hand over his stubbled chin.
Hey, can I show you something?
He dug into his pocket and retrieved a small velvet box that he placed on the counter. A ring box he opened before I could tell him to stop, revealing a carrot-sized diamond that sparkled horrifically in the antiseptic tech zone light. My mouth went dry. I couldn't speak.
Nice, right?
I ground my teeth together.
Well, don't leave me hanging, RJ. That's 2 months of salary right there. What we do for the ladies, right?
He reached across the counter and bro slapped my shoulder hard enough to sting.
Right? Yeah.
I had to force the word out. It felt like a sliver stuck in my throat. He didn't even need a job to afford it.
Anyway, I figured it was time since she moved in and all.
His mouth kept opening and closing, but I didn't hear a single word of what followed. Avery had moved in? With him? What the fuck? I knew she liked him and all, but I figured it was more of an in-lust rather than an in-love thing. A temporary fling at that, like a pile of kindling, would burn bright before burning out. I liked to imagine it. How she'd come into the store in tears, gently dabbing at her swollen eyes as she informed me what had happened. How I'd console her, tell her another guy, like me, would come along and see her for who she really was, a deeply intelligent and compassionate woman, rather than how I knew Eric viewed her, just another nice ass wrapped in pretty packaging. I mean, there was no way he noticed all the small things about Avery I did, like how she left a bowl of milk outside the tech zone entrance most mornings for the stray cat she named Doug. or how when she asked a customer how their day was going, she really meant it. She actually wanted to know. He didn't listen to her the way I did when she spoke about photographing a Texas green jay. Didn't see the way her eyes lit up when she described its feathers and the way it sang right before she snapped the picture. Like it had been waiting for that very moment to unleash its morning symphony. And I was willing to bet my life he'd never once noticed how she hummed when concentrating on something in this adorable tone that,
She'll say yes.
I realized Eric was still talking, his forehead now dappled with sweat.
Sorry, what? Come on, dude. What's with you this morning? Are you high? I asked if you think she'll say yes. Yeah, sure.
He smiled, and I hated that he smiled.
You really think so?
I rubbed the back of my neck.
Well, maybe, but...
He cut me off with another bro slap.
Thanks, man. I owe you one. I'm going to do it this weekend. And keep this between you and me, will you? No ruining the surprise.
With that, he winked at me. Actually fucking winked. Then turned and strode through the door, leaving me reeling in his cedar and pine-scented wake. I would have fallen from my chair if I didn't have the laptop to anchor my vision. If I didn't have Etta, let it drop. Forget about her. But as much as I wanted to, and as rattled as my conversation with Eric left me, I couldn't shake Levi's words from my mind. I couldn't erase the way he'd lifted his head from the cushion and stared at me with those milky eyes of his. So much pain there, so much need. So I told myself I'd do what I do best. I'd spy. No harm in that, right? Besides, I needed something other than Eric and his god-awful news to focus on. And if I discovered anything off with Etta, I'd simply slip the cops an anonymous tip or two. No more confrontations, no more deaths, just an arrest and a bump in my cosmic karma. And this time, I'd need to drive. I have a car, if I haven't mentioned it. A late 2000s Toyota Corolla my mother left me when she fled Oakfield.
You'll be fine, RJ. And now you can come visit us anytime you want to, see?
She told me. A token gift to assuage her guilt for condemning me, the family fuck-up, to a solitary life smack dab in the armpit of Texas. Not that I hadn't long ago condemned myself. Her move simply stamped the period on the sentence I'd already written. A thin layer of dust greeted me as I opened the driver's side door and climbed in. A desiccated yellow pine tree swayed from the rearview mirror, long sapped of its lemony scent. I turned the keys and prayed the thing wouldn't start. An excuse was all I needed to head back inside. But with a few clicks and whirs, it did. I hadn't driven the car for 6 months, and here it was, the engine purring like butter as I eased it into gear and backed out of the apartment parking lot. 2 days had passed since the service. I'd spent them formulating a plan, running the scenarios through my head, and shooting them down one by one. Stroll into Madison House and see if I could get my eyes on Etta's schedule somehow. Maybe chat with the front desk attendant and wrangle up a few details. No, too many eyes, too many people. I'd call instead and ask what exactly? For the names of Etta's patients? Maybe a reference or two? What would that get me? More glowing reviews and my number in the phone company's records? Nope. In the end, I decided on some good old-fashioned stalking. Finding her address didn't take long. She lived on the north side of town, on Lenore Avenue, in a brick house planted in the middle of a picturesque block dotted in cedar elm and Texas ash. I parked several houses down near a stretch of greenbelt where I wouldn't easily be noticed and got to work watching absolutely nothing happen for hours on end. I tore through my stash of Funyuns and Red Bulls with alarming speed. I listened to way too much NPR. For most people, the weekends meant 2 days off, but for Etta, I figured that wouldn't matter much. Death doesn't operate on a 40-hour work week. She came outside exactly once, at 2:30, to get the mail and to squint up at the sun like its rays were a personal affront before shuffling back inside. I threw in the towel around 4 and drove home, then returned bright and early the following morning and resumed my Greenbelt station. The garage door cracked open promptly at 8 a.m. and spit out a gray Buick sedan. Showtime. I eased from the curb and kept my distance. I tailed her to a house downtown, and then to another. I made sure to stay several cars back, never getting close enough that she might spot me or grow suspicious. I followed her all morning to 6 different homes and watched the same scenario play out over and over. Etta knocking on the door, a family member, or in some cases the patient, swinging it wide with a smile and a wave. "Come on in," greeting Etta with a hug like she was some long-lost relative. No one seemed bothered by her presence or even annoyed, and absolutely no one seemed scared. I slunk back to my apartment defeated, once again questioning myself, wondering just what the fuck I was doing. Had I misjudged her? Would this lead anywhere? Just because Jeremy's case had, didn't mean this one would, not that it mattered. The talking photos had given me a sliver of meaning in an otherwise meaningless life. So, I kept at it, burned my lunch hours and weekends, and took a few vacation days, trying to uncover even the slightest bit of impropriety related to Etta, of which I found none. The woman was a fucking saint. Everyone loved her. The grandma you'd never had but always wanted, at times bringing her clients cookies or even pies. I watched her laugh through living room windows. I stared at her as she administered pain pills with the care of a mother, offered gently with a glass of milk and a warm smile. Basically, I hadn't found shit. Look, spying on someone isn't like the movies, all dark sunglasses and car chases. In practicality, it sucks. You have to alter your routines and patterns and make sure you stay on the periphery of someone's life. Not so far away you make zero progress, but not so close you blow your cover. And it's boring. God, so boring. I wanted to quit. I wanted to stay in my apartment, comfortably numb, swaying gently in a THC-fueled breeze of my own making. But I didn't. I kept at it for 2 reasons. The first was that Levi Simmons and his cataract-glazed plea wouldn't let me throw in the towel. He haunted my dreams and clung to the edges of my days like a senile ghost bent on revenge. He woke me in the still, quiet hours to whisper that Etta had hurt him somehow, had done something. What that something was, I hadn't a clue. I only hoped that, if I stuck with it long enough, I'd find out. And the second reason? I couldn't shake the feeling that I knew Etta, that I recognized the shape of her face, the curve of her eyes. The fact I couldn't place from where was maddening. It grated on me, a missing memory that refused to slot into place. Something about it felt like a warning, a countdown to some awful outcome I couldn't unearth. Call it a hunch or divine intuition, but I knew if I took much longer to figure out what the fuck was bothering me about her, shit would hit the fan. And then, on a cool fall day in late October, I met James Keegan. James Keegan, 83, lived with his twice-divorced bartender daughter Nicole, who provided his daily care and relied upon Madison House to assist during the evenings, because someone in the family had to work. And work she did, until 10 p.m. most nights, when she arrived home looking beleaguered and worn, stalling for a quick cigarette before going inside, a habit I didn't begrudge her for. James had dementia, and I could only imagine that watching someone you love slip away, little by little, every day, required a certain amount of chemical assistance. Other than his marathon daytime TV sessions, James Keegan spent most of his time on the front porch, staring at the family of sparrows who called the persimmon tree in his front yard home. And seated beside him every Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday evening, Etta Dumphy, with her knees folded to the side in prim fashion, sipping a tall glass of sweet tea while feeding James bites of a turkey sandwich. For the last 4 weeks, I'd mapped their patterns and movements. I'd watched them through my phone, zooming in on Etta as she reached over to pull strands of James's hair from his head like dead blades of grass. I watched as she smiled when his face registered the pain like a ripple in a pond. There one moment and gone the next, only to lap against the shoreline of his jaw a minute later, in a grimace, as Etta pinched his arm or quickly scratched his hand. Hers was a subtle violence, hidden in the small bruises she left on this elderly man, lost in the fragmented memories buried deep in the smoking ruin of his brain. She moved with sly intent, slowly, as though to give him a reassuring pat on the hand, which she sometimes did, before she sank her nails into the meat of his arm or quickly twisted a fold of skin between her fingers. She kept her attention squared on his face, waiting for that slow eddy of pain to rise before taking another pull of her sweet tea and staring out at the setting sun in satisfaction. It made me sick, these little atrocities. Made me want to get out of my car, stomp down the street, up the steps and onto the patio, and rip free every strand of hair still sewn into her skull. But I forced myself to remain calm, to think of a better, smarter way, and one that wouldn't plant me in the middle of another murder investigation. They took walks, 20-minute strolls down the street to the park, sometimes 25 if they stopped near the pond to feed the ducks, which they were doing more of late. Plenty of time for me to slip inside, plant a couple of motion-activated spy cameras, and get the hell out of there before they returned. Then I'd simply record her handiwork, create a burner email, and drop Frank and the rest of Oakfield's finest a nice little video that would put an end to Etta's reign of terror once and for all. After clocking out of Tech Zone half an hour early, I arrived at the Keegan residence and parked 3 blocks away, behind a privacy fence, where I could see the yard and a sliver of the front porch. Etta and James wouldn't come out for their evening saunter until around 7:15 or so, which left me with 20 minutes to kill. 20 hot, stagnant, empty minutes with nothing to do but peruse Avery's Instagram feed. "Don't," I whispered to myself. "You need to focus." Like if I said the words out loud, it would somehow stop my hand from reaching across the console to retrieve my phone, which, of course, it didn't. It only made me reach for it faster. My thumb hovered over her profile and then clicked on it. There it was, the picture I'd stared at no less than 1,000 times since she'd posted it. Avery raising her finger toward the camera with her starlight smile while flashing the ring.
It finally happened, ladies.
The caption screamed.
He's all mine. Say hello to Mrs. Van Horn.
Avery hadn't just moved in with Eric and said yes to his proposal. They'd actually fucking eloped, in Vegas of all places, as evidenced by a series of appropriately tacky, neon-soaked photos. Eric wearing a white tuxedo and Avery clothed in a sequined cocktail dress, the two of them looking infuriatingly perfect together as they wagged their ringed fingers at the camera. I stared at the pictures for what had to be hours now, memorizing every curve and line of Avery's face, snapshotting the pure joy baked into her dimples and the adoration etched across her face. I didn't understand how Eric could possibly make her this happy. But she was happy, humming more than ever during work, sneaking off for phone call after phone call with her giggling girlfriends, uttering phrases like,
Can you even believe it? And I thought he'd never propose, and now we're married. I know, right? Right?
Ugh. The thought of Eric forever by Avery's side made me sick. I could already picture their children, obscenely beautiful with Avery's waterfall eyes and Eric's symmetrical face. I could envision the sleepy sex they'd have on Saturday mornings before making coffee and heading out back to watch the sunrise together. I could see it all, because those were supposed to be my slightly less attractive kids and my slightly less indulgent weekend mornings, not his. The only thing about the photos that brought me even a millimeter of satisfaction were the ones that followed. Eric and Avery, lounging at a bar a few days later. Eric looking thinner than usual, perched on his bar stool with his loopy expression smeared over his face, like he might fall off and shatter on the floor at any moment. Eric and Avery on a bike ride through Oakfield, with Eric's cheekbones looking like a pair of buried razor blades as they cut against his flesh, the skin beneath his eyes black with exhaustion. The two of them heading into a movie, Eric's hair most definitely looking thinner now, his smile weary, like it took a great amount of effort to stretch it over his face and keep it there. I didn't know what the hell had happened to him, but the dude didn't look well. It looked like he had a tapeworm infestation, or had gone overboard on a keto diet. He even moved differently. The few times he sauntered into Tech Zone for a surprise lunch or an afternoon happy hour, walking gingerly, like his joints were ripe with gout. He still had the muscles, sure, but they were smaller, and certainly not as well defined. Watching him waste away was just about the only thing that brought me joy and the otherwise painful existence I'd endured since finding out he'd proposed. And if he kept it up long enough, I thought, I might just get another shot at Avery after all. A slash of motion pulled my gaze from the phone toward the yard, where I spotted Etta pushing James in his wheelchair down the sidewalk at a leisurely pace. Showtime. I waited for them to round the corner, then slipped from the Corolla and crossed the street with my shoulders hunched beneath a loose-fitting UPS jacket and a box under my arm. I wore a matching UPS ball cap low on my forehead and took measured steps in case any of the neighbors happened to be watching. I wanted to look generic in case any neighbors were out for a stroll or playing Peeping Tom through a window. Down the street, I walked up the driveway and onto the porch, telling myself everything was fine as I grabbed the doorknob with my gloved hand and pushed inside. A shotgun blast of color greeted me. An entryway slathered in pictures, all of it amateur photographer snapshots of trees and hillsides, farms and ranches, mountains and lakes, some of them blurry and none of them good. I moved past them and into a living room sporting all the normal accoutrements, a beige sofa, and worn lazy boy pointed toward a small television set. A pair of side tables, one speckled in orange pill containers, the other in dust. Old carpet and even older air. The stench of medical ointments and herbs filled the air. I grabbed a chair from the kitchen, placed it in the center of the room, and got to work, fishing the first of 2 smoke detector spy cams from the box. Sure, you can hide cameras in clock faces or stuffed animals, bury them in desk plants, or conceal them in electrical outlets. But in my experience, not that I'd admit to having any, you got the best results placing them where no one looked, and no one ever looked at the ceiling. With a grunt, I stepped onto the chair, applied the adhesive to the mounting plate, and froze.
Can I believe you did this again, Jim?
Etta's voice. Shit! Frantically, I leaped from the chair and pulled it back into the kitchen. Then I grabbed the box and dashed into the coat closet, pulling the louvered door shut an instant before she pushed inside with James. That's when I saw it. My spy camera smoke detector lying in the middle of the floor like a voyeuristic calling card. And I knew I was fucked.
You filthy, filthy thing!
Etta said as she wheeled James past the closet.
You know better than to do this on our walk?
I peered through a closet slat and saw Etta jerking his slacks down one leg at a time, ripping them off roughly, along with his shoes.
Here you are, a fully grown man pissing yourself. Again!
She snickered and shook her head, then bent forward and snatched something from his hips and waved it in front of his face. His diaper, I realized with horror, soaked in urine.
And now you've gone and ruined our nice evening together.
She flung the diaper onto the couch with her lips curling down in disgust.
I should let you clean yourself up for once. See how you like it. But you wouldn't, would you? You'd just sit there moaning.
Here, she contorted her mouth and gummed a few syllables.
Mwah, 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 like the baby you are. So, I suppose it's up to me like always.
Then she turned and stepped on my smoke detector with a dry crack.
What's this?
My heart contorted. Specks of light filled my vision. She bent over and picked it up like it was a cockroach or a spider, holding it between her thumb and forefinger as her eyebrows slanted into a V. I knew what the label read. Caution, not an actual smoke detector. And I knew she'd be calling the cops shortly. But she didn't. Instead, she shrugged and set it on the coffee table, then breezed past the closet, so close I could smell the powdery soapiness of her perfume. It took every ounce of willpower I had left not to bolt from the closet and out the door. But I couldn't. Not with James sitting in front of me with his penis lying gray and wilted on his leg. James, who I realized with great alarm, was staring through the half-open slats of the closet, right at me. I jerked back into the shadows and bumped something. A vacuum or a broom, I couldn't tell, as he unleashed a torrent of garbled mush. Moaning until Etta rushed back into the room with a fresh diaper in hand.
Good Lord, what is it now? What's the matter with you?
Man!
With great effort, he raised a trembling hand, extended a gnarled finger, and leveled it at the closet. Sweat bubbled off my neck and slid down my back. My knees felt like they would hinge and give out, but I didn't move. I didn't make a fucking sound. I just prayed that I'd retreated deep enough into the dark she couldn't see me too.
Does a man?
Etta stood and took a step toward the closet, her hand rising to open it, before the sound of liquid hitting the carpet stopped her. The smell of ammonia filled the room, the coppery tang of urine. A snarl bled across Etta's face, and she twisted back around to stare at James, who was once again pissing himself, his thighs gleaming yellow as a puddle formed beneath his waist.
No!
Etta said, marching toward him with quick, purposeful strides.
No, 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 no!
She looked like a force of nature, the way she moved, stopping a foot from James to stare at his now sopping wet legs and darkened socks. Her head rotated back and forth in rapid quarter-inch turns, like if she shook it fast enough, she could make the piss disappear. James no longer looked my way, but instead stared at Etta with eyes that had turned a fearful, glassy pink. His lips wobbled, wet with spit, but no sound came out except for a pitiful moan. Etta retrieved the diaper from the couch and balled it hard between her fingers.
How dare you do this to me, Jim? How dare you?
Then she jammed it into his mouth. She leaned in and brought her face so close to his, all I could see of him was his liver-spotted scalp shaking as he fought for air. Air, I registered coolly, that Etta was determined not to let him have. Time slowed. The next few moments unfurled in front of me like some terrible flower in bloom. I knew what would happen with Etta pressing down, jamming the diaper deeper into his throat. James would seize and convulse in his wheelchair, his lungs desperate for air that would never come. I saw Etta after, looking down on him with her hands on her waist, tisking his corpse, telling him how unfortunate it all was and how it didn't need to happen.
You forced me to do this, Jim. You know you left me no choice.
And after that, how she'd clean everything up, how she'd arrange his body just so, chin slumped onto his chest, legs clothed in a fresh pair of slacks, before the paramedics arrived. Etta would dab her eyes in fake concern as she spoke about how he simply stopped breathing. An EMT would hug her and assure her it wasn't her fault, that this kind of thing happened all the time. And James, poor dead James, with his cul-de-sac of gray hair, would sit there lifeless, just another tragedy sacrificed to old age. That was if I didn't do something to stop it. I made the decision. Etta didn't turn as I slid the door open. She was so intent on smothering the life from the man, nor did she hear the first few steps of my approach. It wasn't until I was a few feet away that she registered my presence and glanced back, her brow lifting slightly in acknowledgement, like we were old acquaintances passing each other on the street.
You!
She spat, the word hurling through the air like an expletive. I moved for her then. I grabbed her wrist as she swung it to slap me. I snatched the other wrist midair when it tried to do the same. Then I forced her back, away from James, who pulled the diaper from his mouth with a wet rush of air and a lung-rattling cough. I thrusted her toward the couch as she screeched.
Let me go! Let me go! Let me go!
We fell together, Etta slamming onto the cushions first, me landing on top of her next. If I were forced to guess, I'd have to put her somewhere in her late 60s or early 70s. But she fought like someone 20 years younger as she hissed and spit, kicked and scratched, trying to break free to, what? Call the cops? Accuse me of theft? Or assault? Rape even? Pretend I was the one trying to murder James instead of her? A lie the authorities would buy hook, line, and sinker if I let it happen. Which I wouldn't, for James' sake and mine. So, I did what any red-blooded, overweight, asthmatic intruder would in my situation. I smothered her. I grabbed a decorative pillow, pressed it over her black cave of a mouth, and pushed down with all my might. Her cries turned from rage to fear as her muffled voice pitched higher toward that of a scream. The sound sapped the strength from my arms. I could barely see the litter of kittens embroidered on the pillow from my tears. A wave of revulsion ran through me, as thick as motor oil, and I nearly pulled the pillow from her face to apologize and help her back to her feet. And I would have if it weren't for James, who stared at me with a firm expression. When he nodded, I knew it was in answer to the question I wanted to ask. Should I? Yes, his nod said. Absolutely. I doubled my effort, the tears coming harder now, pattering off the backside of the pillow.
I'm sorry,
I whispered to Etta as her limbs kicked and flopped and then, with a final pathetic tremor, stopped moving altogether. And that's when her phone rang. I didn't mean to look at the screen. I wouldn't have if Etta's phone hadn't fallen from her pocket during our tussle. But it had, and I did. And what I saw sucked all the air from my lungs. I screwed my eyes shut, then opened them, telling myself it was a dream, that I wasn't seeing this. But I was. Avery. My Avery, staring right back at me in the form of a screenshot, only younger, and with a light spattering of freckles over her nose. I reached for the phone instinctively, my fingers trembling, so thick with paralysis it felt like frostbite. Don't you do it, I told myself. Don't you answer, RJ. The screen went black. It rang again. I answered.
Hello?
Avery said.
Mom?
Bulbs flashed and shattered. Missing pieces snapped together in my mind. I suddenly knew why Etta seemed so familiar and looked so familiar, like I'd seen her before. Because I had, decades earlier, in the newspaper, mourning the loss of her husband, and at work, little glimpses of her buried in Avery's features. The same nose, those same wide eyes, the way they both talked in clipped sentences at times, like they had more to say when they didn't. Jesus, how had I missed it? I just sat there with the phone plastered to my ear, my tongue dry, unable to move, to think.
Mom, are you there? I can hear you breathing.
Avery's voice trembled and cracked.
I need your help. Something awful's happened. It's Eric. He found out about... Oh God, he...
Oh, God. He did.
James said behind me.
Who is that? Who's there?
Avery replied. I hung up. James grunted and doubled over while trying to reach the waistband of his slacks. A string of drool clung to his lips and wobbled like egg white. I stood and helped him hoist up his slacks, lifting him so he could get them over his waist, and then grabbed a quilt from the couch and spread it over his still soaking lap.
I'm sorry,
I said, staring at him. This poor man who deserved none of this.
Can I get you anything?
He cocked his head toward a side table, at the plastic bottle there, half full of water. I brought it to his mouth, and he drank from the straw for a full minute before relaxing his lips, spitting the straw free with a stale puff of air.
Thank you,
he said.
No problem.
I glanced down at my watch. 7:35. Another 2.5 hours before his daughter returned home. It wouldn't do.
Listen,
I said, waving my hand at Eda's corpse.
I knew she was treating you poorly. I can't explain how I knew, but I did, which is why I was here in the first place. I just wanted to install a few cameras and leave, get some proof for the cops.
His eyebrows notched higher in a look of sympathy or concern. I couldn't tell which.
I didn't mean for any of this to happen,
I continued.
I was never going to hurt you.
A nod this time, his eyes telling me everything I needed to know. He believed me.
Okay, so here's what's going to happen. I'm going to text your daughter from Mrs. Dunphy's phone there and tell her I'm not feeling well and that she should come home. Then, when she does, you simply tell her in the best way you can she had a heart attack. Think you can do that for me?
Another nod. Something like fire in his gaze now. Whatever this man was in his past life, before age took its toll, it wasn't a coward. I retrieved Eda's phone from the floor and thumbed her contacts, swiped twice, found Nicole's name, and hammered out the text. Pressed send. It wouldn't take her long to get here. 14 minutes and 32 seconds to be precise. I knew because I'd timed her from the bar. 20 if she stopped for cigarettes, which she wouldn't. Not tonight. I was about to set the phone down, about to pull the pillow off Eda's face and arrange her in full heart attack posture, when the screen blipped to life with a text from Avery. My blood thickened. I told myself to put the phone down, that there wasn't time for this, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. I had to know what it said. My finger tapped the screen, and the message flashed to life.
Mom, help!
3 dots appeared at the bottom of the screen to let me know another message was on the way. A picture this time. One that, for the second time in the last few minutes, stopped my heart. It was of Avery bound and gagged, crammed into some desolate corner next to a dark blue door that I instantly recognized. Mascara mixed with her tears and ran down her cheeks. Her shirt hung in tatters, ripped open to reveal half a milky breast. Bruises stung her neck. Her forehead wept blood. I gaped at the photo, had no clue what to do or where to go. I just sat there, stunned as fuck until, with a sickeningly familiar sizzle of the screen, the picture came to life. Avery bucked and strained, crying out with the same muffled shrieks I'd heard her mother make as I smothered her. A voice rose from the speaker, one I instantly knew.
"It's over for you,"
Eric said.
"You'll never see the light of day again."
Then the screen sparked and went to black. My insides sloshed as I drove, my organs liquid loose, threatening to climb up my throat in a shower of vomit. I asked myself the question again. How had I missed it? How? I knew everything about Avery, her favorite food, what music she listened to, her daily routines, the movies she watched, the books she read, the friends she kept. Everything but the most important thing. Eda Dunphy, moonlight psychopath and elder abuse aficionado, was her mother, was being the key word, because I'd just killed her.
"Shiv!"
I said loud enough to make myself jump. The car swerved, and I pulled in a breath and told myself to focus, to concentrate on the road, to think. Avery Carter, Eda Dunphy. Carter, because Avery had kept her late father's name. Dunphy, because Eda had kept the name of her most recent betrothed. William Dunphy, owner of a paper supply company, a dour-looking man with a face as boring as the paper he sold before a massive heart attack, or more likely murder, made Eda a widow. Again. 3 marriages in total, and I'd only uncovered 2. I hadn't time-traveled far enough into the past to unearth the first. And why would I? What was the point? I only wanted to surveil the woman before handing her off to the cops. Besides, Avery had never talked about her mother, only her dad, and only then on the rarest of occasions. In fact, I don't think I'd heard her say his name more than twice. Once on his birthday, mumbling to herself he'd be 67 if he'd lived. And again, after I'd asked her who'd inspired her affinity for photography. She said my dad. As much as I didn't want to admit it, I'd made a massive mistake by overly focusing on Avery, and not those who'd made her. I'd snorted her tweets like a drug, sifted through her Instagram in hopes of another bikini photo, or a close-up of her perfectly shaped face and lake green eyes. What secrets hid behind those eyes? What was she really like outside of Tech Zone? A freak between the sheets? A closet sadomasochist into whips and leather? Did she believe in a god? Did she spend her weekends scouring the universe for meaning, wondering like me why she'd been consigned to the spinning green globe as a speck of organic matter? Who was her mother was never a question I'd thought to ask. A fucking psychopath, just like Eric, apparently. Eric. The photo from Eda's phone flashed to life in a series of stutter-stop images that left sear marks on my brain. Avery bound and helpless, her throat veined as she shrieked. All that damaged red skin, the tears coating her cheeks. Eric's smooth bro voice sliding out from behind the camera, telling her she'd never see the light of day again. Hopefully, I'd never have to find out what that meant. Avery was still alive as far as I knew, and unlike the other photos, this one had come stamped with a time mark, one from the future, 8:17 p.m. to be exact. Whatever that bastard Eric had planned for Avery hadn't happened yet, and I was going to make damn sure it stayed that way. The horizon blushed pink as I parked across the street from Eric's house and got out. No, not Eric's house, I corrected. Their house. After discovering Avery had moved in, I'd spent a couple of evenings, okay, more than a couple, parked down the street, staring at their perfect lawn and their perfect front porch, while imagining their perfect life behind that perfect blue front door. The same door I'd just seen Avery languishing against on Eda's phone. She looked like Sarah Brooks, beaten and bruised and without hope. A cloud of guilt swirled through my chest. What a coward I'd been to give Lyle his phone back, to hand it to him without a word about what it contained. How gutless and pathetic, how incredibly true to form. And now, here I was, once again in the same situation, the sole witness to an unfolding tragedy. Except this time, I'd do something about it. But what exactly? Part of me wanted to rush across the street, over the yard and through the door, action hero style, to kick it open and send Eric's teeth down his throat with a solid right hook. A fantasy that would end with me in a hospital bed or more likely dead. Even in his diminished state, Eric was still yoked with muscle. I'd be lucky to land a single blow if he saw me coming. No, I'd need to be smarter than that. I'd need to take him by surprise. I popped the trunk and snatched the tire iron, and then made my way across the street toward the backyard and slipped through the gate. A lush green lawn greeted me, edged in brick, the sides thick with tansy and blooming aster. Around the corner I crept, keeping close to the house. I moved onto a stone patio where I peered through a window into the kitchen. Dirty dishes foamed from the sink. Used glasses and boxes of cereal cluttered quartz countertops. A trash can overflowed with Coke cans and fast food to-go boxes. A living metaphor for Eric. Nice to look at on the outside, nothing of substance on the inside, except Avery. I pulled back and eased toward the sliding glass door and grabbed the handle with a prayer. Don't be locked, don't be locked. It was locked. Shit. I went back onto the lawn and around the far side of the house, past a hose reel, toward a brown storage container planted beneath another window. One, I knew immediately, I could reach and possibly squirm through, if it was open. Moving as quickly and quietly as possible, I clambered onto the container, set my hands on the glass and,
What are you doing?
the voice nearly sent me tumbling to the ground as I spun around. A girl of maybe 5 or 6, with a freckled face and wide, curious eyes stood a few feet away, appraising me through a wrought iron fence with a look of mild curiosity instead of fear. Why she didn't bolt for her house, crying about the robber next door, was beyond me.
Oh, hi there. I'm just trying to, get inside. Why? You don't live there. Yeah, but I'm one of Eric's friends. Why don't you use the door then? It's locked and...
Think, dumbass. Tell her what she wants to hear.
I haven't seen Eric in a long time, since college, and I wanted to surprise him.
The lie came out sounding dumber than I'd imagined it, but hopefully good enough for a kid.
Oh.
The girl twisted her foot in the grass, looked lower, and frowned.
What's that? What's what? That thing in your hand?
She pointed at the tire iron in my hand.
That.
I glanced at it with a shrug. Like breaking into someone's house with a 2-foot piece of steel was as normal as breathing.
Just something I borrowed from Eric. I'm giving it back.
Her brow furrowed.
I thought you said you hadn't seen him in a long time.
Jesus, who was this kid? I thought. Nancy Drew?
I haven't. I simply wanted to... Look, kid, just leave me alone, okay? Go play or something.
She stepped back from the fence.
I'm gonna tell my mom on you! Wait, don't do that!
I said, pumping some more sugar into my voice.
You wouldn't want to ruin my surprise, would you? I'm a friend of Eric's. A good friend, I promise. No, you aren't! You're a liar! Mommy!
Her screech split the air like an ice pick. I would have run then. I would have bolted toward the street and my car if it weren't for the sound that followed. Another shriek, coming from behind me, muffled through 2 panes of glass. Avery! I lunged for the window, relief flooding through me when it opened. I pulled myself up and over the sill and into the bedroom, nearly upending a floor lamp in the process. Down the hall, Eric's voice thundered, followed by the bright, stinging smack of flesh on flesh, followed by Avery's cry. He hit her, I thought, numbly. He actually fucking hit her. My lungs swelled with anger. I gripped the tire iron and I ran. Through the door and down the hall.
You fucking bitch!
Past a dining room piled in boxes, around the corner and...
I'll kill you for this!
Into a living room where Eric stood, hulking over Avery, with gluey strips of scalp peeking through his sweat-matted hair. Something about the sight stopped me. His skin had taken on a sickly jaundiced hue, miles from the normal, tanned bronze I was used to. His t-shirt was matted against the shoulder blades and sharp angles, his neck soaked in sweat. He held a length of rope in his hand, and the way his knuckles cracked as he brought it lower, toward Avery's neck, confirmed my fears. He would kill her unless I did something. She skittered back, away from him, toward that awful blue door, her face a pale miasma of fear, her eyes wide and lips stretched to her ears, nostrils flared. Blood streamed from a cut on her forehead. Her teeth cut a white line through the pale pink of her gums as she cried,
Eric, stop!
And then her eyes found mine, and she screamed. A high-frequency buzz filled my head. I rushed forward and swung the tire iron as Eric turned, his gaunt face stretching in shock a second before the steel slammed into his temple with a savage blow that sent him stumbling sideways. He raised an arm in defense, but not in time to ward off my next strike. A 2-handed, arcing shot to the middle of his forehead.
Wait!
He sputtered. I didn't. I cocked the bar and brought it crashing back into his teeth. I swung so hard, I left my body and floated up toward the ceiling, hovering there as my mouth howled.
Leave her alone! Leave her alone!
While destroying what was left of Eric's face. Words filled the room. Panicked cries I couldn't register until a hand came to rest on my shoulder and shook me from my rage.
Stop, RJ! Stop!
Avery's words pulled me from the ceiling, and I whirlpooled back into my body. The tire iron slipped from my hands and thudded to the carpet. I blinked and blinked and blinked. Through the blood in my eyes and the gore on my face. Tears slid warm past my lips and fell from my chin. I hadn't meant to do this, to turn Eric's face into a pile of human Play-Doh. Or had I? I wasn't sure. All I knew was, in that moment, I'd never do to Avery what he'd just done. I'd never hit her. If given the chance, I'd treat her the way she deserved to be treated. With respect, with love. I'd appreciate every hour, minute, second spent together. Because it's all I'd ever wanted. If only she'd give me the chance. Which, I realized with a jolt, was happening. I could see it in the way she was looking at me. Scanning the hills and valleys of my face with something other than annoyance or outright disgust glimmering in her eyes. Really looking at me. Like she was seeing me for the first time.
Are you okay?
I asked as I drew my thumb over her blood-speckled cheek. Her lower lip trembled.
Oh, Oh my God, RJ. I thought I was dead.
She burst into tears, and I pulled her into my arms and held her there. My skin hummed with her heat. I ran my fingers through her hair and left it streaked in blood. She wrapped her arms around me and cried as we held onto each other for what felt like a lifetime. Her tears were warm upon my shoulder, her breath hot upon my neck. Every inch of her body felt so perfectly molded to mine, like a piece of me I didn't know was missing had finally been restored. When she pulled back, her face had regained some of its composure, but not much. Her lips still quivered as she spoke.
What are you doing here? How did you... No,
I finished. She nodded.
it's kind of hard to explain. Try me. You'll think I'm weird.
She smiled at that and hiccuped a laugh and wiped her eyes.
I already do.
I laughed too. I couldn't help it. Our own little cute moment. And then said,
It started after my seizure. I began seeing things in photos.
her eyebrows twitched adorably.
What kind of things? Things people have done. Bad things. Bad people. I don't understand. You don't have to. I just knew there was something off about Eric, that he wasn't right for you.
I glanced back at him then, at the carpet freshly abloom with his blood, and I no longer felt guilt for what I'd done. He'd hurt Avery, and he'd done it for the last time. I turned back to her.
How long has he been hitting you?
Her eyebrows wriggled again, almost like she seemed surprised by the statement. But then they settled back into place, and she reached over and ran her knuckles across my cheek.
Oh, RJ, is that what you think? He wasn't? No, silly.
The sound of approaching sirens cut her off, and the room exploded into a throbbing bruise of red and blue lights. Doors opened and slammed. Footsteps pounded up the walkway.
You called the cops?
Avery asked, looking stunned.
No, I didn't.
The girl! Shit!
No.
Avery muttered as she stood and began to pace.
This can't happen.
Her fingers worked into her hair, and her skin paled. I sat there, watching her dumbfounded, wondering why it was a bad thing that the cops were showing up. I stood and took her by the shoulders.
Hey, calm down. What's the matter?
She stared past me, at Eric, still shaking her head and muttering, talking so quietly I could barely understand what she was saying. A fist pounded on the door.
Open up! Police!
I glanced at it, and then thumbed her chin and guided her gaze toward mine.
Avery, none of this is your fault. You don't have anything to worry about. You're not even the one who killed him.
Her lips stopped moving then, and her eyes seemed to clear. She blinked and nodded in agreement.
You're right. Oh my God, you're right.
Then she leaned forward and kissed me on the cheek, her lips setting off a cloud of heat in my chest.
Thank you, RJ.
Our first kiss, I thought dumbly as the door blew open and two cops pushed through, guns drawn.
Jesus!
One of them said, glancing at Eric and then back at me.
Who did this?
I opened my mouth to tell them I did, and that it was all in self-defense, that Eric would have murdered Avery if I hadn't killed him first. I didn't need to. Avery beat me to it.
He did!
She said, pointing at me with a fresh round of tears streaming down her face.
He broke in, and then he tried to kill me.
They shuttled me downtown to Cattle County Jail. Yes, that's really its name. A squat, lifeless building planted dead center in an ocean of cracked asphalt that I'd never before had the displeasure of entering. My eyes stung as the cops muscled me through the front door, the LED slathered interior instantly scorching my retinas. I stood there like a moth, drunk with light, unable to move, to think, as I replayed the look Avery had given me, the rapid disintegration of her face as it turned from gratitude to fear, until one of the cops jabbed me in the back and told me to
Move it, asshole!
He shoved me hard toward a mugshot station where another cop with familiar gray eyes and a mustache waited. Frank. Jesus. I didn't say a word. I couldn't say a word. I just stood there and obeyed his instructions as the camera clicked and flashed. By the time he turned me over to another officer for further booking, I'd broken a sweat. Forms, fingerprints. Would I like to make a call? Do I want an attorney? No, and I don't know. A full body search, a change of clothes, a short-sleeved blue jumpsuit that smelled as old as it looked. Then they led me into an interrogation room and told me to sit, which I did, for over an hour, as two stern-faced detectives grilled me like an overdone steak.
What were you doing in Mr. Coleman's house? How long have you known Avery Monroe? Were you planning to kill her?
My answers came in the form of silence. I didn't say shit. Not because they both made me nervous as hell, which they did, or that I was afraid I'd say something stupid and serve up a nice, guilty, steaming confession, which I would, but more so because my brain was still overheating thinking about Avery and how she'd betrayed me. Why would she do that when, only a few minutes earlier, I'd saved her life? It didn't make any sense, which only made me question it all the harder. It bothered me so much, I barely noticed when the cops hauled me to my feet and escorted me down a long concrete corridor toward a holding cell. Standing there, propping the door open, was Frank. I made the mistake of meeting his gaze and instantly regretted it. The way he stared at me, with the corners of his eyes creasing as he shook his head, made me want to crumble.
Lights out at 10.
He said gently before shutting the door.
Breakfast at 7.
He looked at me a second longer, through the glass slat in the door, until I could no longer stand it. When at last I glanced up again, he was gone. I spent the next several hours pacing back and forth in between the toilet and the concrete bed, wondering how it had all gone so wrong. How, of all places, I'd wound up here, in the bowels of Cattle County Jail. I pictured it again. Avery when she first saw me, and the shock in her eyes. Eric standing above her looking like absolute dog shit. His skin pure plaster. His hair thinned to the point of balding. The undiluted rage in his voice.
I'll kill you for this!
Kill her for what? What exactly had Avery done? And who was she really? What did I even know about her? Tech zone manager? Lover of the outdoors? Bird photographer? The daughter of a killer? Lightning crackled in my brain. Pieces fell into place. The way she'd latched onto Eric. Their rapid engagement and marriage, even though they didn't have a single thing in common. Eric's sudden deterioration. The way he looked like he'd come apart in a stiff breeze. None of it could be a coincidence, right? The dude had gobs of money, and I'd misjudged Avery. She did want it. She wanted it all. But not if it meant a lifetime listening to Eric blather on about all things keto while raising a dim litter of his children. Because that's what it would take. So why not just poison him instead? The pressure in my head dropped. I barely made it to the toilet before parting ways with the contents of my stomach. And then I sat there, with my head propped pathetically on the toilet lid, cursing my idiocy. How incredibly stupid had I been not to see it, when it had been there all along. Right fucking there. Baked into Eric's wasted features, into his words. It's over for you. You'll never see the light of day again. His meaning dawned with a horrible truth. This jail cell, with its whitewashed cinder block walls and its rusted toilet, were never intended for me. They were meant for Avery, until I'd so dumbly decided to take her place. A smell woke me, the stale of nicotine and coffee, a hot blast of breath on my face. I came awake to Frank standing over me, holding a tray of food and shaking his head.
Why, RJ? Why?
My tongue went numb. I couldn't speak. He set the tray on the bed and crossed his arms.
You want to know something, RJ? I always knew your sister would go places, that she would amount to something. But it was never her I thought would go furthest. It was you.
I let out a tiny rasp of sound.
Me? I can see that surprises you, but it shouldn't. You remember that time when we all went to Lake Travis and you and your sister rowed too far out and lost the oar?
I nodded as the memory surfaced. A vague recollection of the two of us, boiling in Frank's aluminum canoe beneath the summer Texas sun. My sister Janelle crying the entire time that we'd drown, even though we were nowhere close to tipping over.
Well,
Frank continued,
your mom wanted me to rush out and tug you both back in, but I told her to wait, that you'd figure it out. And you did, with that old fishing rod of mine.
a sad smile crept across his face.
You were the one who thought of that, RJ. You were the one who brought that oar back in, not Janelle. You were always doing stuff like that, figuring out problems, coming up with solutions I never expected. I knew you'd make your mark in life, just not like this.
He tossed something onto the bed. A newspaper I hadn't registered him carrying until that moment. The Oakfield Journal, with a shot of me being escorted from Avery's house in handcuffs. Above the picture, splashed in all caps, the headline read, "Local citizen suspected of savage murder." I stared at it for what felt like an eternity. My mouth went sour. I hadn't noticed any photographers snapping pictures. Not that that meant anything. I'd been in shock, was still in shock, and seeing the photo only worsened it.
I'm disappointed in you, RJ,
Frank said before shuffling toward the door.
I guess I was wrong.
I raised my head to tell him he wasn't, that he and everyone else had the situation backward. But he was already gone. An emptiness swelled within me, a negative space where my heart should be. I picked up the paper and stared at it again. There I was, an overgrown man-child being led toward the police cruiser with my head hanging in a slump and my hair drizzled over my eyes in greasy curls. Blood splotched my shirt and my jeans. If a picture existed of someone who looked guiltier than I did, I'd never seen it. Frank might as well skip the trial and fire up the electric chair himself. Disgusted, I moved to set the paper aside and my skin rippled. Spiders crawled down my legs. The photo went blurry, then clear. Blurry, clear, blurry. It kept happening while in the picture, my chin rotated off my chest in a series of stop-motion shifts, like a camera lens struggling to focus. My eyes appeared, two dark pools of ink, my mouth widening until I tossed the paper onto the floor and jumped to my feet.
No,
I muttered to myself.
No.
Yes, a voice replied. My voice. It sounded snake-like. It sounded like death. I closed my eyes and shook my head, pressed my hands to my ears. My voice cut right through them like an ice pick. Sticky warmth bled over my palms and down my wrists.
RJ, you can't ignore this. You must watch.
No, I didn't, I told myself, but already I was inching toward the newspaper and stretching out a hand, fingering an edge. A feeling of weightlessness overtook me as I snagged the paper from the floor and turned it over. There I was, still in the photo, but no longer the focus. Avery was, seated on the front step with a pair of paramedics comforting her. But her eyes weren't on them. They were on me. A lifeless smile stitched across her face.
Watch,
She said, and I did, as the photo went black, then resolved into a different scene entirely. Her on a windswept cliff, staring over a grand vista next to a man with gentle eyes. A vacation, perhaps, or a road trip. Just the two of them in this moment, until Avery pulled her hand from his, set it on his back, and shoved. Another scene. Avery older now, preparing a cup of tea, spooning in honey and a packet of white powder before bringing it to another man seated upon a couch. A sickly man with sparse hair and yellowed eyes who took the tea and swallowed it with a smile. And a third, this one asleep on a bed, waking a moment before Avery brought the hammer down, centered directly between his eyes. I dropped the paper and kicked it beneath the bed. I stared at the wall for hours. The decision wasn't an easy one to make. I didn't take it lightly. I waited for night to fall, ate my dinner in silence, and then settled onto my bed with a semblance of peace. Frank didn't stop by again to say goodbye before leaving, and for that, I was thankful. I thought of him then, and of the brief flicker of happiness he'd brought into my life on those too few fishing trips of my youth. Frank's sitting there beside me in his boat, explaining how life wasn't so different than trying to catch a trout, that it takes work and patience, and sometimes a little luck. But hey, remember, RJ, things usually end up where they should be in time. Everything except for me. I stood and felt my way through the dark toward the sink and knotted one end of my torn shirt around the faucet and then the other around my neck. I took a breath, pulled it deep within my lungs and held it there. I pictured Avery once more and the imaginary children we'd never have. The boy with the nose like mine and the eyes like hers. The girl who'd beg me to chase her around the house before bed, kicking up her heels in laughter until I caught her and carried her to her room. A nice dream. A nice life. Good enough. Thanks for listening. If you enjoy these stories, be sure to subscribe to the podcast and check out some more of my episodes here.